Welcome back then folks to already the last day of Special Projects Pack number 12, and of course we are finishing strong with the Challenger race car later on, and now a classic build for the Porsche 356. And I didn't even plan for this. I mean, of course, I don't think you really could plan for this unless you know exactly what the dates are, which I certainly didn't, but two of this week's vehicles that are harder to find are actually in the legendary dealer. The Nissan Fairlady is in there right now, and this car is a special pick as well in the legendary dealership. So what I said in that 432R video was actually, of course, incorrect. That one was not a classic dealership. It was a legendary dealership car. So as far as this one, this is actually a real car. The number 600 white and green. I saw it on Google. Love the look of it. Checked out the specs. So we are running pretty much as close to the real numbers as I could get in terms of power and weight. And then as far as the livery, I managed to find a player who had done it. A few different people had clearly taken inspiration from the Google image, but this player was the closest I could find in terms of really trying to get it right. All the little stickers, the Goodwood stuff, the drivers' names, all that kind of good stuff, and especially the tone of the green, because many cars had way too bright of a green or it was just completely off. So this one I'm really happy with. It's got the right racing number as well. In terms of, excuse me, in terms of the actual build though, it's fairly simple, with not a huge amount of power. Of course, the car itself is pretty much the biggest investment you're going to make in terms of tuning it, but as far as the upgrades themselves, if we jump first of all to the weight, you want your stage 1, you've got comfort mediums as standard. Now when it comes to classic racing replicas, some people I know prefer to keep them more realistic and more challenging, so if you want to do that, absolutely go for like sports or comfort, whatever you want to. For me, I've gone wildly overkill to racing tyres just to make it an absolute grip monster. But like I said, that's up to you. As far as the club sports section, you want your high lift cams. I'll just double check in the Ultimate one. We do have S. I missed that just now when I was checking. So high lift cams are fitted as standard if I recall. If you go for the S version, you've got the bored out engine. As far as the weight, you want your stage 2, we've got the power restrictor, which we're not actually using for this one, your ballast as well. As far as the semi-racing stuff, the fully customised ECU, of course, not exactly period correct, but you got to get the power one way or another. The racing crank, of course, the limited slip diff, the fully customised manual box, so you've got the better ratios, but it still has that nice, chunky, more manual, well, as it is, feel, rather than the sequential box. Stage 3 weight. Perhaps surprisingly, I've opted not to do the body rigidity, and to be honest, you really don't need to. After driving it, it's so quick through corners. Anyway, as far as the racing stuff, we've got the balance tuning, the stroked out engine, the air filter, the silencer, not the manifold though, because that would be too powerful on this one. The racing pads and discs. Again, you could consider that to be overkill for this car, but hey, it's a bit of fun at the end of the day. You could go for ceramics, again, not period correct. I've gone for the drilled, which I usually do. Of course, you've got the slotted or vented, depending on what you want to call them, as an option. We've got the racing clutch and flywheel, race suspension, and then, like I said, the racing hard tyres, which is wildly overkill for this one. You definitely don't need that, but it's fun, and it is tremendously quick through corners, as you'd think. It's got the steering angle adapter, again, to improve the turn in. And, of course, for the ultimate section here, you could see what we'd already fitted, which was just the cams. So it's fairly simple in terms of what you actually need to do to it, but in terms of the tuning side of things, because like I said, we are running the real world numbers, or at least what I could find online in terms of the horsepower, in terms of the weight, so up around 170 horses, 750 kilos. It's a pretty good combination for a 1954, I think it is, the real car, because of course in the game this one is what, 1956, so it's technically a little bit older than the car that we're basing it on. So we've got the racing hard tyres, or I should say that the car that we're building is older than the one that's in the game, but you know what I mean. We've got the racing hard tyres fitted for the suspension, 110mm, which sounds pretty high, but that's actually as low as you can get on this one. We've got 5 on anti-roll, 30 and 40 for the dampers, 2.85 for the springs, only 2 degrees of camber, which is probably less than you'd be thinking for a rear-engine Porsche. As far as tow, a fairly hefty amount. Tow out 0.10 on the front, tow in 0.30 on the back, 20, 30 and 30 for the diff. I've opted for 230 kilometers an hour, so pretty close ratio, but obviously when the car's only got 170 horsepower anyway, it's not like you're going to be doing up around 160, 170 miles an hour that often, so I went for more so the acceleration side. And of course, having more control over the short shifting gears, it just gives you more maneuverability through the lower end stuff and really tight corners, which is really what this car's all about anyway. The ECU and the power restrictor are untouched. You want to add 28 kilos of ballast, and I've put that all the way to the front. It's actually not too far off a 50-50 split for something that has the engine so far back. The downforce is of course non-adjustable, and over here it's pretty simple because of course you already saw me fit it. And even in terms of the points, for something with racing hard tyres that's pretty light, especially a Porsche, 568 is quite reasonable. That's not too crazy, but all that remains, of course, is to jump out actually to a circuit, and I can show you what the car is like in practice. Now, like I said, this one, especially on racing tyres, is a missile through corners, and I was expecting to have to make notes in terms of, oh, this is how you've got to use this car, and be careful of this, be cautious of that. Well, at least on these tyres, and of course it will change on sports or comforts depending on what you use, but on racing hards, this thing is so good to drive, it's so much fun, and 170 horsepower sounds kind of modest compared to many other special projects, but it feels so perfect for this car. And I think it's vehicles like this which really show as common of a joke as it is for people who are kind of petrol heads but not really, to make jokes that the 911 is just a Beetle. They say that as if it's an insult, but the Beetle is actually one of the most versatile platforms, even in competition, ever made. So to say that it's like a Beetle is actually true, because the 356, even as old as this one is, and as basic as the horsepower is, it already shows just how capable that platform can be. And to me, that's really impressive. This thing is so much fun to drive. It's probably one of my favourite builds from this particular pack. So if you do decide to use it, maybe you've got an extra 356, maybe you want to buy the one that's currently in the Legendary dealer, it's like 600 grand. So for a classic, it's not crazy expensive compared to a lot of them. So if you want to give it a try, of course, I hope you enjoy it. If you do put it on lower grade tyres, it will be potentially even more useful, but probably a bit more challenging as well. But I'll leave that down to you. Of course, though, there's one build left later today for the Challenger race car. I hope you've enjoyed the week so far. We'll round it out later on, and for now, thanks for watching.